As parents grow older, many of them slowly fall into a habit without even realizing it, the habit of seeking constant approval from their children. It starts innocently enough. You adjust your plans so your son or daughter won't feel inconvenienced. You hold back your opinions because you don't want to upset them. You agree to things you'd rather not do simply because you don't want to risk creating distance. At first, this seems harmless. After all, what's wrong with putting your children first? But over time, this pattern of behavior becomes more than just sacrifice. It becomes a way of living where your own needs are quietly erased. The problem with this is simple yet painful. When you begin to chase your children's approval, you actually push their respect further away. Instead of valuing you more, they begin to value you less. Why? Because human nature is wired to adapt. What is freely given again and again without limits eventually stops being seen as special. The kindness that once inspired gratitude now feels ordinary. And when gratitude disappears, entitlement takes its place. Your children stop seeing your efforts as gifts and begin seeing them as obligations. What was once love turns into expectation, and what was once closeness turns into imbalance. Take a moment to reflect on this truth. When you were raising your children, they looked up to you as their guide. They respected your authority, your wisdom, and your strength. They didn't respect you because you begged for it. They respected you because you carried yourself with confidence and lived by your own principles. That dynamic only begins to weaken when, as a parent, you start treating your children as the center of your identity rather than part of your life. The more you bend to please them, the more they believe your life exists only for their convenience. I remember a woman named Margaret who lived this exact struggle. She had always been a strong, independent person when she was younger. But as her children grew older, she started to believe that the only way to keep them close was to give up her own voice. She never disagreed with them, even when she wanted to. She shifted her entire schedule around their needs. When they dismissed her opinions, she said nothing. When they spoke to her with impatience, she let it go. "I just don't want to lose them," she explained. But in her silence, she lost something else, her dignity. Her children began to see her as someone who would always adjust, always agree, always stay quiet. Instead of bringing them closer, her sacrifices pushed them further away. She thought she was protecting her bond with them, but in truth, she was teaching them to take her for granted. This is the heartbreaking irony of approval seeking. The harder you try to gain respect through sacrifice, the quicker that respect fades. And the more you silence yourself to keep the peace, the less peace you actually feel in your own heart. Parents who live this way often end up not only feeling invisible, but also resentful. They wonder why their children don't appreciate them, forgetting that appreciation only grows when generosity is given with boundaries, not without them. So what is the way out of this cycle? The answer lies in reclaiming self-respect. Respect from others begins with respect for yourself. If you don't value your own time, your own needs, and your own feelings, why would anyone else, including your children, value them? The first step is to set boundaries. Say no when you genuinely cannot or do not want to do something. Stand by your decisions without guilt. Express your opinions, even when you know your children may disagree. You don't have to shout or argue. You simply have to speak with quiet confidence. Over time, your children will learn to recognize that your presence carries weight and that your life is not something they can dismiss or take for granted. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine your daughter calls you last minute and says, "Mom, can you watch the kids tonight? I know you had plans, but you can cancel, right?" A parent chasing approval would cancel their plans, agreeing reluctantly while feeling quietly hurt. But a parent with self-respect would calmly say, "I can't tonight because I already have plans, but I'd be happy to help tomorrow." The first response seeks approval and earns none. The second response sets a boundary and earns respect. The difference is not in what you do, but in how you value yourself. Another important shift is to stop giving endlessly without appreciation. Help your children when you want to, but don't give to the point of exhaustion. If they don't acknowledge your efforts, step back. Let them feel the absence of your help so they can realize its true value. Remember, generosity without boundaries doesn't create closeness, it creates entitlement. The less you give without gratitude, the more your children will learn to see your time and energy as precious. It's also important to remember that standing up for yourself doesn't make you unloving. Many parents fear that saying no or setting boundaries will push their children away. But the truth is the opposite. Children, like all people, respect strength. When you respect yourself, they may resist at first, but eventually they will admire you for it. They will come to see you not as someone who is desperate for their attention, but as someone who lives with dignity. And respect always grows from dignity. Think of it this way. When you were young, you didn't admire the people who begged for approval. You admired those who carried themselves with confidence, who spoke their minds, who treated themselves with worth. The same is true now. Your children may not admit it, but deep down, they will respect you more when you show them that you value yourself. The first step in regaining your children's respect, therefore, is to stop running after their approval. Approval is fleeting. It rises and falls with moods and circumstances. But respect, the kind that lasts, is built on consistency, boundaries, and self-worth. If you want your children to see you differently, you must first see yourself differently. Stop thinking of yourself as someone who must earn their affection, and start remembering that you are the foundation on which their lives were built. You don't need to beg for respect. You already deserve it. And the moment you stop chasing their approval, you create space for that respect to return. One of the biggest mistakes parents often make, especially as their children grow into adults, is believing that respect can be demanded through arguments. It's natural to feel frustrated when your children dismiss your words, ignore your advice, or speak to you without the reverence you expect. In those moments, it can feel tempting to raise your voice, to remind them of the sacrifices you made, to insist that they owe you respect. But here's the harsh truth. Respect never grows out of arguments. Respect grows out of example. Think about it for a moment. If you argue with your children, what happens? They may listen in the moment, but their hearts close off. They don't absorb your words as wisdom. They hear them as complaints. They don't see you as a guide. They see you as a critic. The more you argue, the more they resist. And the harder you push, the further they pull away. Arguments may win a momentary silence, but they rarely win long-term respect. On the other hand, example is a language that cannot be ignored. When you live with strength, dignity, and self-respect, you don't need to shout for attention. Your presence itself commands it. A parent who carries themselves with grace doesn't need to remind their children of their worth. Their worth is evident in how they live. This is why leading by example is far more powerful than demanding through words. Consider a father named Raj, who always complained that his adult son didn't treat him with respect. Whenever his son disagreed with him, Raj would launch into long speeches. "I am your father. I worked all my life to provide for you. You should listen to me." His son, rather than feeling grateful, only grew more distant. One day, Raj's brother pointed something out. "You're always telling him to respect you, but you don't respect yourself. You talk badly about yourself. You let people walk over you. You never follow through on your own goals. Why would your son see you as a man to admire?" That conversation changed Raj's perspective. Instead of demanding respect, he began living in a way that inspired it. He pursued hobbies he had abandoned. He started taking care of his health, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. Within a year, something amazing happened. His son began to naturally show him more respect. Not because of arguments, but because Raj had reminded him, through his actions, of the kind of man he was. This is the secret many parents miss. Children of any age learn less from lectures and more from observation. When they see you standing tall, even in old age, they cannot help but admire you. When they see you taking care of yourself, setting boundaries, and living with purpose, they instinctively begin to treat you with the respect you deserve. But when they see you constantly complaining, arguing, or playing the victim, they begin to lose admiration. Words may be forgotten, but example leaves a lasting impression. Think of it like this. When your children were young, did they follow your instructions because of what you said or because of what you did? If you told them not to shout but shouted yourself, did they listen? No, if you told them to be honest, but they saw you lying, did they obey? Of course not. They copied what they saw. That same principle holds true even when your children are grown. If you want them to treat you with respect, you must show them how you treat yourself with respect. If you want them to value your time, you must show them how you value it yourself. Example is the invisible teacher that never stops working. Let's imagine another scenario. A mother feels her daughter never listens to her advice about relationships. Every time she tries to talk, it turns into an argument. The daughter accuses her of interfering, and the mother feels hurt. One day, instead of insisting on being heard, the mother quietly focuses on her own marriage. She begins treating her husband with kindness, patience, and respect. Over time, her daughter notices. She sees how her mother handles disagreements calmly, how she maintains dignity even when she's upset, and how she creates harmony in her household. Without a single lecture, the daughter begins to understand what a healthy relationship looks like. That is the power of leading by example. Another important aspect of leading by example is how you respond to disrespect itself. If your child raises their voice, and you raise yours louder, the situation only escalates. But if they raise their voice, and you respond calmly and firmly, you show them that you will not be dragged down to that level. Your calmness becomes your strength. They may not admit it in the moment, but deep down, they recognize your composure as power. Over time, they begin to mirror it. This doesn't mean you should accept bad behavior silently. Leading by example isn't about being passive. It's about showing through your actions what is acceptable and what is not. If your child cancels plans with you repeatedly, don't argue. Simply stop rearranging your life for them. When they notice that you carry on with your life joyfully regardless, they learn that your time is valuable. If they disrespect you in conversation, calmly excuse yourself and walk away. That action speaks louder than any lecture. It says, I will not allow myself to be spoken to this way. With consistency, such actions slowly reshape the dynamic. The truth is, respect is not something you can demand through force. The harder you try to control your children with words, the more resistance you create. But when you focus on controlling yourself, your actions, your habits, your way of living, you create a quiet influence that cannot be denied. Your children may not admit it, but they are always watching. And what they see shapes how they treat you. The great philosopher Epictetus once said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. This is the heart of leading by example. Instead of explaining why your children should respect you, embody the qualities that naturally earn respect. Be consistent. Be dignified. Be firm yet kind. Let them see in you a person worth admiring, not just a parent demanding obedience. So the next time you feel the urge to argue for your worth, pause. Ask yourself, am I trying to win their respect through words, or am I showing them my value through actions? Words may fall on deaf ears, but actions build legacies. Choose to live in a way that speaks louder than arguments. In the long run, your example will outlast every word you ever spoke. One of the greatest struggles parents face as their children grow up is learning to set boundaries. For many mothers and fathers, The very idea of saying no to their children feels wrong, almost unnatural. After all, from the moment those children were born, your role was to provide, to sacrifice, to put their needs above your own. You gave up sleep, comfort, dreams, and countless opportunities just so your children could have a better life. It becomes so ingrained that by the time they are adults, you feel guilty even thinking about drawing lines. But here lies the truth that so many parents discover only too late. Love without boundaries doesn't strengthen relationships, it weakens them. When you never set limits, your children begin to believe that your time, your energy, and your sacrifices are infinite resources. They don't mean to take you for granted, but without boundaries, they simply don't realize the value of what you give. Just as water from a tap is often wasted because it seems endless, your constant availability makes your presence feel ordinary. And nothing destroys respect faster than being treated as ordinary. Think for a moment about your own relationships outside of your children. Do you respect people who let you walk over them? Or do you respect those who, while kind and generous, also stand firm on what they will and will not accept? Respect is born not from endless giving, but from balance. It grows when kindness is paired with strength, when generosity is paired with limits. Let's take an example. A mother named Grace found herself constantly exhausted because her adult daughter relied on her for everything, babysitting at the last minute, running errands, even helping with bills. Grace never said no, even when she felt overwhelmed. She thought that if she refused, her daughter might get upset, or worse, grow distant. But the result was the opposite of what Grace hoped. Instead of feeling grateful, her daughter grew more demanding. The more Grace gave, the less it was appreciated. It wasn't until Grace finally started setting boundaries, politely but firmly, that her daughter began to respect her time again. Grace would say, "I can watch the kids on Saturday, but not during the week," or "I'm sorry, I can't lend money right now." At first, her daughter resisted, even became upset. But over time, she adjusted. And to Grace's surprise, their relationship actually grew healthier. With boundaries in place, her daughter not only respected her more, but also became more independent. This is the paradox of boundaries. Though we fear they will push people away, they often bring people closer. Why? Because boundaries create clarity. They teach others how to treat us. They prevent resentment from building. They keep relationships from becoming one-sided. Without them, love begins to rot under the weight of unspoken frustration. With them, love can breathe freely. Another reason parents struggle with boundaries is guilt. You may think, "But my children are my world. Isn't it selfish to put myself first sometimes?" The answer is simple. No. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships. When you protect your time and energy, you're not only preserving your own well-being, but you're also teaching your children a vital lesson that every person, no matter how close, deserves dignity. By respecting yourself, you give them permission to respect themselves too. Consider how powerful this lesson can be. A son who sees his mother always overextending herself may grow up believing that love means burning yourself out for others. But a son who sees his mother set healthy boundaries learns that love can exist alongside strength, that kindness doesn't require self-destruction. In this way, your boundaries don't just protect you, they shape how your children approach their own lives. Now let's talk about practical steps. Setting boundaries begins with clarity. You must first know your own limits. Ask yourself, what am I willing to do and what am I not willing to do? What behaviors am I willing to accept and what will I not accept? For example, maybe you are happy to babysit your grandchildren occasionally, but not every week. Maybe you're fine with giving advice, but not with being spoken to disrespectfully. Maybe you're willing to help financially in emergencies, but not as a constant safety net. Write these down if you must. Clarity in your own mind is the first step. The second step is communication. Boundaries only work if they are expressed. But here's the key. They must be expressed calmly and firmly, without anger, without guilt. Instead of saying, "You always take advantage of me," which sounds accusatory, you can say, "I can't do that this week, but I'd be happy to help next week." Or, "I feel uncomfortable when I'm spoken to that way, so I'm going to step away from this conversation until we can talk respectfully." The tone is respectful, but the boundary is clear. The third step is consistency. Boundaries are meaningless if they're constantly broken. If you set a rule, but then give in every time your children push, they will never take you seriously. Consistency teaches them that you mean what you say. At first, they may test your boundaries, even react negatively. That's normal. But if you remain consistent, they will eventually adapt. It's also important to prepare for the emotional side. When you first start setting boundaries, guilt will creep in. You may feel as though you're being unkind or abandoning your children. This is where you must remind yourself, guilt is not truth. Guilt is simply the residue of old habits. For years, you lived as though your role was to give endlessly. Of course, it feels strange to finally say no. But remind yourself that healthy boundaries are not rejection, they are protection. They protect your time, your energy, your dignity, and ultimately, the very love you want to preserve. Imagine a beautiful garden. If you let anyone walk through it without paths, without fences, the flowers will be trampled, the soil destroyed. But with clear boundaries, gates, paths, and fences, the garden thrives. Boundaries don't destroy love, they protect it. They keep it from being taken for granted. So the next time you hesitate to say no to your children, remember this. You are not only a parent, you are also a person. And every person has the right to self-respect. By setting healthy boundaries, you are not pushing your children away. You are inviting them to see you clearly, to appreciate you more, and to treat you as the valuable human being you are. Love is not about endless sacrifice. It's about balance. And boundaries are the balance that keeps love alive. One of the most painful realities many parents face is this. After years of dedicating yourself completely to your children, you suddenly find yourself sidelined in their lives. When they were young, you were at the center of their world. Every decision, every milestone, every achievement involved you. But as they grow, build their careers, start families, and pursue their own dreams, you may begin to feel like an outsider. Phone calls become less frequent. Visits grow shorter. Your advice is often ignored. And in those quiet moments, you might ask yourself, if I'm not constantly needed as a parent, then who am I? This is where many parents make a heartbreaking mistake. They cling harder. They wait by the phone for their children to call. They sacrifice their own interests in the hope of staying relevant. They make their entire identity revolve around their role as a parent, long after their children have grown. But instead of bringing their children closer, this often drives them further away. Why? Because no adult child wants to feel like they are their parents' only source of happiness. It creates pressure, guilt, and distance. The solution is not to cling tighter, but to rebuild your own life. To rediscover yourself not just as a parent, but as a complete human being with passions, dreams, friendships, and purpose that exist outside of your children. Think about it. Before you became a parent, you were someone. You had hobbies, friendships, maybe even wild dreams of places to see or things to achieve. But over the years, many of those parts of you got buried under responsibility. Now, in this new season of life, it is time to dig them back up. Parenting will always be part of your identity, but it cannot be your entire identity. The most powerful way to earn respect from your children is to show them that your life is full, vibrant, and meaningful, even without their constant involvement. Let's look at an example. Maria, a retired teacher, spent decades raising her two children. Once they moved away, she felt lost. She called them daily, often feeling upset if they didn't have time to talk. The more she demanded attention, the less they wanted to answer. One day, a friend encouraged Maria to join a local book club. She hesitated, thinking, "I'm too old for that now." But eventually, she went. That one decision sparked a chain of change. She made new friends, discovered new authors, and even began writing her own short stories. Slowly, her life filled up again. Ironically, as she rebuilt her life, her children began calling more often, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. They admired her new energy. They saw her not just as mom, but as a woman they respected. This is the transformation that happens when you rebuild your own life. Instead of being a burden on your children, you become an inspiration. Instead of chasing their attention, you naturally attract it. Respect grows when they see you living fully. Now, rebuilding your life doesn't mean you must make drastic changes overnight. It starts with small, intentional steps. Reconnect with old passions. What did you once love before life got busy? Maybe it was painting, gardening, music, traveling, or cooking. Dust it off and try again. Your passion is still waiting for you. Learn something new. Growth doesn't stop with age. Take a class, learn a language, try a new skill. The world is full of opportunities to expand your mind. Imagine the pride your children will feel when you tell them, "I just started learning photography," or "I signed up for a yoga class." Invest in your health. Physical well-being is the foundation of independence. Whether it's walking, exercising, or simply eating better, prioritizing your health shows your children you are strong and capable. Nothing earns respect faster than showing resilience in your body and spirit. Build friendships. Loneliness is one of the biggest dangers in later life, but it is not inevitable. Seek out community, neighbors, clubs, volunteering, faith groups. Relationships outside of your children give you a support system that makes you stronger. Set new goals. Why should goals only belong to the young? Maybe your goal is to travel to a new country, to write a book, to start a small business, or to run a marathon. Having goals keeps life exciting. When you begin to live fully again, something shifts, not only in how your children see you, but in how you see yourself. Instead of thinking, "I'm just waiting around for my kids to need me," you start to think, "I have a life worth living, whether they are here or not." That inner confidence radiates outward. And respect always follows confidence. There's also a psychological layer here. Children often test the boundaries of respect because deep down they want to know, is my parent strong? Are they someone I can look up to even now? When they see you rebuilding your life, they get their answer. They see that you are not simply existing, you are thriving. They see that you are not just their caretaker, you are a person with purpose. And that realization transforms the dynamic. Consider a father who always dreamed of learning guitar, but never had the chance. After retirement, instead of sitting idle, he finally buys one. At first, his children laugh, thinking it's a passing hobby. But over time, they see him practicing daily, performing at family gatherings, even playing with local musicians. Suddenly, their father isn't just old dad. He's a man with passion, persistence, and courage. Their respect grows not because he demanded it, but because he showed them that life doesn't end at 60, 70, or even 80. Rebuilding your life also protects you from bitterness. Many parents, feeling neglected, fall into resentment. After everything I did, this is how they treat me? That bitterness poisons not only the relationship with your children, but your own peace of mind. The antidote is to fill your life so fully that their neglect no longer defines you. When you have your own joy, their attention becomes a gift, not a lifeline. Imagine the shift. Instead of calling your children with loneliness in your voice, you call them with excitement. You tell them about your new hobby, the friends you met, the book you're reading. Instead of waiting for them to entertain you, you bring energy into the conversation. This not only makes your children enjoy talking to you more, but it also changes the balance of the relationship. You stop being the dependent parent and you become the inspiring parent. So, if you feel your children no longer respect you, don't sit in the shadows of their choices. Step into the light of your own. Rebuild your life with courage. Rediscover the dreams you set aside. Pursue the things that ignite your spirit. Live with the curiosity of someone who knows that life still has treasures waiting. Remember this truth: your worth does not end with your children's approval. You are a whole person, and your life is still unfolding. The more you rebuild your life, the more you remind your children, not with words, but with actions, that you are someone to be respected, admired, and cherished. One of the most powerful tools in any relationship, whether with children, friends, or partners, is communication. Yet many parents underestimate just how much their communication style affects the respect they receive from their children. Think about it: when children are small, communication often flows one way. Parents give instructions, children obey. But as those children grow older, especially into adulthood, the dynamic must change. If communication doesn't evolve, friction builds. Parents who continue speaking to their adult children as if they are still small may find themselves ignored, dismissed, or even avoided. On the other hand, parents who learn to communicate with strength, clarity, and respect often find that their children listen more, not less. The key lies in balance. Strong communication does not mean shouting, nagging, or demanding. That kind of force creates resistance. Nor does it mean silence, passivity, or avoiding difficult conversations. That kind of weakness breeds neglect. The goal is to find the middle ground: communication that is firm but calm, clear but respectful, honest but loving. Let's start with what ineffective communication looks like. Imagine a father who constantly repeats himself to his adult son: "Why don't you ever call me? Why don't you listen? Why don't you visit more often?" Over time, the son begins to tune out. The words lose power because they come from a place of complaint, not clarity. The son may even begin to avoid phone calls, knowing what conversation awaits. Now, contrast that with a different approach. Instead of nagging, the father sits his son down and says calmly, "Son, I love you. I understand you're busy, but when I don't hear from you, I feel disconnected. What would be a realistic way for us to stay in touch that works for both of us?" Notice the difference. The words are clear, direct, and grounded in love. Instead of blaming, they express feelings. Instead of demanding, they invite collaboration. That is communication with strength and clarity. Many parents unknowingly sabotage themselves by relying too heavily on emotional pressure. They say things like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." While the pain behind those words is real, the effect is often counterproductive. Children may feel guilty in the moment, but guilt does not build lasting respect. In fact, it can create resentment. Strong communication, on the other hand, doesn't manipulate. It teaches, explains, and sets expectations with dignity. So, how can parents develop this kind of communication? Here are a few guiding principles. 1. Speak from I, not you. When you begin sentences with "you always" or "you never," your children immediately feel attacked. Their natural response is to defend themselves or shut down. Instead, use I statements that express your feelings without placing blame. For example, instead of saying, "You never respect me," try, "I feel hurt when my advice is dismissed." Instead of saying, "You never call," try, "I feel closer to you when we talk regularly." This subtle shift changes the tone from accusation to connection. 2. Be clear and specific. Vague communication creates confusion. If you want respect, be clear about what respect looks like to you. Does it mean being spoken to politely? Visiting regularly? Not interrupting you when you talk? Define it. For example, I appreciate it when we speak without raised voices. It helps me feel respected. Clarity sets a standard. 3. Stay calm under pressure. Children, especially teenagers or young adults, sometimes push boundaries to test their parents' strength. If you respond with yelling or emotional outbursts, you lose credibility. But if you remain calm and steady, you show inner strength. Calmness is not weakness, it is power under control. 4. Choose the right time. Important conversations should not happen in the heat of anger. Timing matters. If your child is stressed, busy, or distracted, your words may fall flat. Wait for a quiet moment, then speak with intention. Respect is not only about what you say, but when and how you say it. 5. Listen as much as you speak. Communication is not a one-way street. If you want your children to respect your words, you must also respect theirs. Listening does not mean agreeing with everything, but it shows that you value their perspective. Often, children resist communication not because of what is said, but because they feel unheard. When they see you truly listening, they are more likely to return that respect. Let's illustrate this with a story. John, a widowed father, often felt ignored by his adult daughter. She rarely visited, and when she did, they argued. One day, instead of starting with complaints, John tried something different. He told her, "I know we don't always see eye to eye, but I want to understand your side better. Tell me how you feel about the way I talk to you." His daughter hesitated, but then admitted that she often felt judged, even when John thought he was only giving advice. That moment of listening opened a new door. By simply hearing her without interruption, John earned a new kind of respect. Over time, their conversations grew warmer and their bond strengthened. This shows another truth. Communication with strength and clarity often requires humility. Respect is not demanded, it is earned. And one of the most powerful ways to earn respect is to show that you, too, are willing to grow. When your children see that you can adjust your words, that you are open to feedback, they realize that you are not stuck in old patterns, you are evolving. And nothing commands respect more than growth at any age. But make no mistake, strength remains essential. Listening and humility do not mean letting your children speak to you disrespectfully. If your child uses harsh words, you have every right to say calmly, "I love you, but I will not continue this conversation if I am spoken to in that way." This is not anger. It is dignity. Children may not like it in the moment, but over time, they learn, my parent deserves respect, and I cannot treat them carelessly. Another vital part of clear communication is consistency. If one day you demand respect, but the next day you allow disrespect, your words lose weight. Clarity comes not from one big speech, but from repeated actions. Every time you communicate calmly, directly, and consistently, you reinforce your standard. Respect grows in repetition. Finally, remember that communication is not just about words. Your body language, tone, and even silence communicate volumes. Standing tall, making eye contact, and speaking steadily send the message. I respect myself, and I expect the same from you. Silence, too, can be powerful when used wisely. You don't need to win every argument with words. Sometimes, walking away speaks louder than anything. So, if you feel your children no longer respect you, examine your communication. Are you nagging instead of guiding? Complaining instead of clarifying? Demanding instead of dialoguing? Or are you speaking with strength, clarity, calmness, and love? Respect does not grow from force or guilt. It grows from communication that reflects dignity. The more you master this, the more your children will begin to see you not as a voice to ignore, but as a voice worth listening to. At the heart of every parent-child relationship lies a timeless truth. Children learn far more from what they see than from what they are told. You can lecture endlessly, demand obedience, and enforce rules, but in the end, your children will respect not what you say, but what you do. This is why the final, and perhaps most powerful, action to earn back your children's respect is to lead by example, not by control. Control is an illusion many parents struggle to release. When children are small, control feels natural. You decide what they eat, where they go, how they dress, when they sleep. But as they grow, the more you try to cling to control, the more resistance you create. An adult child no longer wants or needs constant control. They crave autonomy, independence, and the freedom to make mistakes. Parents who try to control their children in adulthood often find themselves met with rebellion, avoidance, or silence. But here is the paradox. When you let go of control and instead focus on leading by example, you often gain something much more powerful than obedience. You gain respect. Children may resist commands, but they cannot ignore character. They may tune out your lectures, but they will always notice your actions. Think about your own life. Who are the people you respect most? Chances are it is not those who demanded respect, but those who lived in a way that deserved it. A mentor who practiced what they preached. A neighbor who treated everyone with kindness. A leader who stayed calm in crisis. Their actions spoke louder than their words. The same principle applies to parenting. For example, consider a mother who constantly tells her children, "You need to be responsible, you need to be disciplined," but they see her procrastinating, neglecting her health, or complaining about everything. Her words lose power because her example contradicts them. Contrast that with a father who rarely lectures about discipline, but every morning, without fail, they see him wake early, exercise, and handle his responsibilities with quiet strength. Which parent will earn lasting respect? The one who models the values, not the one who merely talks about them. Leading by example also means showing the qualities you want to see in your children: kindness, patience, honesty, resilience. If you want your children to treat you with respect, treat others with respect, including them. If you want them to manage conflict calmly, manage your own conflicts without anger. If you want them to value family, show them through your own efforts to connect, forgive, and love. One of the most inspiring stories I know is of a grandmother named Helen. Her children often argued with one another, and she was tempted to step in, take sides, and control the situation. But instead, Helen decided to lead by example. Whenever conflict arose, she remained calm, kind, and forgiving. She never badmouthed one sibling to another. Over the years, her children began to notice. They started asking themselves, how does mom always stay so peaceful? Slowly, they began to imitate her. Helen never demanded that her children be respectful. She modeled respect, and they followed. Leading by example does not mean being perfect. In fact, one of the strongest examples you can give your children is how to handle imperfection. When you make a mistake, admit it. Say, "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." This simple act shows humility, accountability, and strength. Many parents fear that admitting mistakes will make them look weak. But the opposite is true. It takes courage to own your flaws. And when your children see you do it, they realize that respect is not about never failing. It's about how you respond when you fail. Let's also talk about legacy. Every parent, whether consciously or not, leaves behind a legacy. Not just of money or possessions, but of values, habits, and character. What do you want your children to remember about you? That you tried to control every decision they made? Or that you lived with integrity, kindness, and resilience, no matter what? Imagine your child years from now, telling their own children about you. What stories do you want them to tell? That you argued about little things, that you nagged, that you demanded attention, or that you were strong, wise, and compassionate, that you lived a life worth admiring. Every day, with every choice, you are writing that story. This brings us to another key truth. Respect is not forced, it is inspired. You can force obedience, but not genuine respect. True respect is given freely, and it is given most easily to those who inspire it. Inspiration comes from example. A parent who rebuilds their life, communicates with dignity, and shows resilience in hardship inspires their children to look at them with admiration. And admiration is the seed of respect. For example, picture two different scenarios. In the first, a mother constantly tells her daughter, "You should exercise, you should eat healthy, you should manage your money better." But she herself neglects her own health, spends recklessly, and ignores discipline. In the second scenario, another mother never preaches about health or money. Instead, she quietly manages her finances, keeps herself strong, and lives responsibly. When her daughter visits, she sees it in action. Which daughter will grow up respecting her mother more? Clearly, the second. Leading by example also means knowing when to step back. Sometimes, the greatest show of wisdom is restraint. If your child makes a mistake, instead of saying, "I told you so," show empathy. Help them learn, but don't rub it in. That humility shows strength. It says, "I don't need to control your choices. I trust you to learn and grow." And nothing builds respect faster than trust. This principle applies in small, everyday ways too. If you want your children to respect your time, respect theirs. If you want them to be honest with you, be honest with them. If you want them to treat you with patience, show patience when they are imperfect. Over time, these small acts create a cycle of respect. Of course, leading by example does not mean allowing disrespect. Boundaries still matter. But when you enforce boundaries, do so with dignity, not control. Instead of shouting, say calmly, "I love you, but I will not allow myself to be spoken to in that way." When you uphold boundaries firmly yet respectfully, you show your children what self-respect looks like. And the more you respect yourself, the more they will respect you. Ultimately, parenting is not about controlling every outcome. It is about shaping character through your own. Your children will not remember every rule you set, every lecture you gave, or every argument you won. But they will remember how you lived, how you treated them, and how you treated others. They will remember your example. So ask yourself, am I trying to control my children, or am I inspiring them through my own life? Am I demanding respect, or am I living in a way that naturally earns it? The truth is simple. Respect cannot be forced, but it can always be earned. And the most lasting way to earn it is not by control, but by example. The more you live with strength, humility, and purpose, the more your children will look at you and think, "This is someone I admire. This is someone I respect."